also hear school refusal or school phobia. They all refer to essentially the same thing. And some examples of this can be on a spectrum. So at the most extreme, it might be complete absence from school, where the student just maybe was showing up and then completely stopped showing up, or just really never came in the first place. It could be partial absence, where the student is leaving the school grounds early or between classes, or even during class, coming some of the time, kind of more intermittent attendance. It could look like lateness, um, that becomes a little bit more habitual or infrequent, asking to go home, or frequent trips to other resources on campus, so to nursing, to counseling, or to wellness centers instead of actually being in class. And we have included some measures for you to be able to assess school-related school refusal. Two scales, a parent version as well as a youth version of the SRAS that we'll include at the end of this for you to have with you and on the iEcho platform too. Okay. And so, one thing we know is that school avoidance does not occur in a vacuum. There's context and often underlying mental health context that leads students to want to not attend class or not attend school. One of the most common underlying reasons for school avoidance are anxiety disorders, and that could be a variety of them, ranging from social anxiety to specific phobias, students just being afraid of people or being afraid of certain things happening inside of school. Depression, feeling lonely or having a sense of belongingness that isn't quite there, ADHD, as well as learning difficulties like dyslexias or executive functioning difficulties. So all of these might actually be interacting, and students might have one or more of these types of problems that might keep them from showing up in school. And so want you to think about underlying mental health issues that might be going on under the hood when a student doesn't show up or refuses. So, I mentioned some mental health reasons that students might want to avoid school. What are some other factors that contribute to school avoidance? And feel free to put them in the chat. And you can think from your own personal experience, from your students' experiences, from other teachers, providers, school staff, their experiences. What are other factors? Peer conflict, yes, great ones. Yep, grief and loss, these are awesome. Bullying, yes. Transportation related needs, kind of these bigger systemic social issues that come up. Yep. Separation anxiety, that was a great one. I didn't include that in the list. Lack of school connectedness, I really like that one too. Yep, not feeling connected to the school environment. Fears of deportation, homelessness, language barriers. Yes, these are really astute. Yes. On point. Yes. Financial struggles. Yes. So we know that all of these might be interacting together to keep students from wanting to keep them avoiding, right? So not easy to address. Okay. So one way to think about school avoidance is to look at what it looks like at the surface level. So just like we talked about, that might be missing class, asking to go home, sitting in the nurse's office, going to wellness. And this might look similar between students, but might also look different. What we'd actually like you to do, instead of focusing on kind of this tip of the iceberg at the top, is to look underneath the iceberg as to why avoidance might be occurring. So I want you to kind of put your detective hat on and think about what are some functions or underlying reasons that school avoidance might be occurring. And there are kind of four buckets that you can group these under. One is that the student might want to be avoiding painful internal experiences. So just like some of y'all mentioned in the chat, social anxiety, separation anxiety, panic, feeling very stressed, feeling physically uncomfortable when they think about approaching school, and that feels really uncomfortable and they want to avoid it. So internal experiences might be maintaining avoidance. Painful external experiences might also be maintaining avoidance. Having to take a test that's unpleasant, having to talk in front of teachers, having to play a sport, Some of the other reasons, as you all mentioned too, experiencing bullying from classmates, being worried about being deported, not feeling a sense of belonging at school, or feeling kind of antagonism from teachers or other students, right? So school avoidance might serve as a way of buffering that pain so they don't have to experience it. So instead of experiencing it, they avoid it and get a little bit of relief. Another function of school avoidance might be for them to receive attention from parents or caregivers so that they can stay at home, or from school counselors or medical staff, that there's some underlying support need that avoidance is maintaining. And then the last bucket is that they just want to feel good. And who doesn't want that? So, skipping out on school or being able to stay at home, calling out sick, they might actually get more fun time or bonding time with a caregiver, or might have a chance to watch TV or play video games instead of having to stress about an exam or an assignment, or hang out with their siblings. That this might also be a reason. And oftentimes there might be more than one of these going on under the hood, but really want you all to think collaboratively with caregivers, with school staff, to really understand what might, for this specific student that you're working with, be these underlying reasons that they're avoiding school. And that will really help you target it more effectively. And then also want to say that we've included a link here to a past echo on the ABC model, which is how to identify antecedents that might be coming ahead of school avoidance or problematic behaviors, and then thinking about consequences of those behaviors too. So just another kind of way of trying to get at what some of these underlying functions are and how you can target these behaviors in the moment. So we've included the QR code for that in the chat, and you'll, sorry, in the slides, and you'll also have them, you also have these slides afterwards too. Okay. So what can you do in the moment? I know a lot of that is kind of a little bit conceptual and vague, but what can you actually do when there's a student who's not showing up to school right now in the moment? And exposure is one thing you can do. Um, and exposure, I'll give you an example in my own personal life. So I experience fear when I'm in group settings often. And so sometimes what I'll do is that I'll bring my best friend with me. So I'll be in a group setting and my anxiety will grow up, and I'll bring a friend with me and maybe just like stay with them through most of the evening. And that might give me some relief from anxiety, but it's not actually teaching me to face it. What it's actually teaching me to do is to cling to someone or be with someone to help me cope, instead of teaching me to actually walk in the room and maybe talk to someone myself. So that pattern, which we call a safety behavior in this example, is a form of avoidance that's actually going to make it more likely that when I approach a group setting in the future, I either won't go unless my friend's free, or if a friend is free, I'll go with them and stay with them for most of the night. So this is my own personal pattern. And this last week, I've tried to do a little bit of exposure therapy myself, which was to go to a group setting with some friends and some new people and actually try to socialize. So try to confront that anxiety in my body in the moment, stay in the room, stay kind of sovereign with myself, and maybe actually try to speak to people. And what this message over time will send my brain, even though my anxiety goes up in the moment, is that one, I can do tough things and in the midst of anxiety and still live according to my values, which are to connect with people. And it might also teach my brain that if I do scary things, my anxiety might go down over time, or it might habituate this right side of this graph. And so we call that an exposure, is to actually confront something that kicks up anxiety for you instead of avoiding it, and to stay in the moment doing something that matters to you in the midst of anxiety. So how do you do that? One way of doing that is to build what we call a gradual exposure hierarchy, also known as a ladder. So you might rank things for a specific student, for things that might kick up a certain level of anxiety, certain exposures, and then all the way up the ladder to things that might kick up even more anxiety. So before we talk about how to do this, I want to ask you all, why build an exposure ladder like that? And feel free to put some reasons into the chat. Why have it be listed step by step what a student should do? Why do that at all? Yes, you get a visual, you have clear, attainable goals. Building confidence. I love this one, Cheyenne. Small steps feel more attainable. That's exactly right. Set goals. Meet the client where they're at. Yes, I also love this one to show students where they're already capable. Yep, you might put some things on that ladder that they're already doing. Yeah, to show that they actually are doing some exposures in the moment. Yep. Yep, lessen the anxiety because they know what's coming next. Yep, being able to plan, being able to manage expectations. Visually, these are all perfect. Yes, dead on. Okay, so I won't belabor that point anymore. I'll ask you another question then. What might get in the way of doing exposure gradually, like on a ladder? So maybe you've done this with a student before, or maybe you're thinking about a specific student. What might get in the way of them doing gradual exposure? Fear of next steps? Totally. Lack of staff support? Yes. Yes. So not having enough coordination between staff members. Fear in general? Exactly. Lack of confidence? Love this one. Frustration with not having immediate relief? Yes. Starting before they're ready? Uh-huh. Fear. Yep. An enabling family. Inconsistency by parents. So you guys are on it. These are really on point reasons. Yes, these are all reasons it might be um, might make it hard to do a gradual exposure. Exactly. So keeping some of those things in mind, let's talk through how you might actually build a ladder. So we've got one student in particular that just made this one up. So the first thing you want to do is come up with some anchors. And so one way is to have anxiety anchors running from zero. I like to explain this as like I'm sitting on the beach. I don't have a care in the world. My anxiety is as low as it could possibly be to a 100, which is maximum anxiety that's actually unsustainable, that a human cannot live in a max of 100 for a long period of time. So it's max overwhelm. So these are kind of two ways that I'll explain this to a youth. And then you want to start thinking with them kind of creatively, collaboratively about what are some steps on this ladder that might evoke certain levels of anxiety. And we're talking about positive behaviors here too. So it's not like avoiding not going to class. Instead, you might say, as specific as you can, going to class, sitting in the chair for 10 minutes. We want as much specificity as you can give in these positive behaviors. So, for example, for this student, waking up and just getting dressed, pretending to go to school but not going, might evoke an anxiety of around 30, right? So, low-ish anxiety. So, you want to start on the low end. And then you want to start on the top end. So, what might evoke kind of max or near max anxiety? And that might be staying in class for the whole class period. That is the most anxious that they could imagine themselves being. So, you want to fill out the bottom rung first, and then the top rung, and then you'll start filling out these middle ones. So, okay, what is one step below staying in class? That might be actually walking to the classroom and standing outside the classroom and maybe talking to somebody. What are a couple steps below that? Walking to the school bus to go to school, right? So you want to get as many of these as you can personalized to the student. You might need to actually collaborate with caregivers, other staff, wellness providers, counselors who know the student well as the student themselves to be able to build this ladder. So I want you to think collaboratively about doing this as a team as much as you can. And then you want to get set up for climbing the ladder. And students need support, but so do schools. So on the student end, you might want to teach some basic cognitive behavioral skills, like how to check the facts. So to think about, would a catastrophe happen? If a catastrophe happened, could they actually cope? Maybe teaching some deep breathing or relaxation that they can use while they're doing the exposure. And then on the school end, one thing to be really careful of is to not over accommodate. So some of you guys really nailed this in the chat to say sometimes if they look really stressed, oh my gosh, I don't want to make them more stressed. I'll just send them over to wellness. right? Like they're saying they're having a tough time. I really feel for them. I have empathy for them. I'm just going to let them go to wellness instead of actually sticking with the exposure. That might be kind-hearted and very earnest, but that can actually, in the long run, make avoidance more likely in the future because you're sending a message to their brain that, okay, when I'm in pain, I can get some relief instead of actually staying with it and doing the tough thing. So instead, we want you all to keep focusing on skills, be super consistent. And so if they're doing an exposure that day and you have a plan with them to do it, following through on it, and then recognizing that school staff might also need to manage their own emotions. So might also need to do some deep breathing and relaxation because this is tough. It's tough. Okay. Step four are to plan some rewards. So once you have a sense of what the hierarchy is or what the ladder is, and you start having them climb up, typically you want them to climb up around the middle zone, around like a 50. So something that's a little bit uncomfortable, but that they feel confident that they can do. But that might depend on the student. If some student is really willing to do like a higher level exposure with a higher level of anxiety, and they feel confident doing that, you can also plan for that too. So it's really working individually with the student. And then after they do an exposure, trying to give them as soon as possible a reward in the moment. So I put some here, giving them some verbal praise. You did such a great job, giving them stickers that they can put on a sheet and keep at school or keep at home on their fridge, earning privileges like free time or time with friends or screen time. What are some other rewards that might work for students who you know? Just feel free to put them in the chat or you can say them out loud. What are other rewards? Free lunch. Yeah, it's a great one. Food. Yes. Yes. Lunch. I've missed all the food ones. Yes, that's actually what would work on me is food. Swag, extra recess. These are on point. Exactly. Yes. Okay. And another thing to keep in mind is in order to get that free lunch, you might need to collaborate with other school providers and school staff to be able to plan for that in advance. Um, and might need to collaborate with caregivers too. So want to think of this as kind of a group collaborative process. Okay. And like I mentioned before, we want to avoid accidental reinforcement. So what that means is when they're distressed, they get attention instead of saying, okay, let's focus on the skill and do some paced breathing and let's actually stay in class for 10 minutes. Okay. And then also including a link here for a Project Empower. It's a science-backed one-session program for parents, but school providers can use it. Really, anybody can use it to build bravery and reduce anxiety in youth. And so you might find some of this content relevant if you're working with a student who's avoiding school as well. So including that QR code in the slide here that you'll have access to. The last thing is to plan for relapses. So one thing to differentiate between a bad day, which is that they plan to do an exposure, but maybe just had a hard time getting through it and only did it partially. A lapse, which is maybe that they've missed an exposure for a day or they've missed the full exposure for a day or two. And a relapse, which is a um, more patterned set of avoidance that's happening. And we want to normalize slips or bad days and lapses because that's just being human, right? No one's going to do this perfectly, especially when there are all these factors that are going on that are maintaining avoidance, both at the student end and also at the school staff end. So we want to normalize that and praise effort, not just success. So like it sounds like you were feeling really stressed, but you still got up and tried to go to school. Wow, that's really amazing. Let's talk about what happened so we can understand that more together and also keep pushing ahead, right? So, really want to avoid shaming and really kind of think about this as a non-linear path towards ultimate school approach. I'm including some resources here, the link to the ABC model video from a prior echo, the single session intervention through Project Empower, these two measurements to assess school avoidance that are in the iEcho, and also a handout for you all with some practical steps on how to build an exposure ladder, which is also in the iEcho. And I'll stop there. We've got a couple minutes for questions too.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ramaiya. Before we turn it over to the case-based learning, does anyone have any questions about exposure ladders? You can feel free to put something in the chat or use the raise hand function. Okay, I think then we can turn it over to the case-based learning. So we do have a case presenter set for today. So thank you in advance, Elise, for volunteering from Santa Cruz. As we get ready here, I just want to pull up our agreements for the case-based learning. And as I'm doing this, I do just want to try to address some questions that are coming through in the chat. So we will post all of the resources that I've been putting in the chat to our calmap.org webpage. And we also will have them available in the iEcho platform for download. And if you're having any trouble accessing anything, please do feel free to reach out to us, and we can try to send you anything directly. And I see a request for a language translation. We're working on those, but if you have something really like high priority that you're asking for, just send us a note and we can see if maybe we can bump something up on the list for translation. Other quick announcements. Thank you everyone for joining this morning. This is our first time using the iEcho platform for our CalMap case-based learning and iEcho sessions. And so I think folks may have had a little bit of hiccups getting in because there were 2 registration forms. Now that you've completed those registration forms, you should be able to enter directly every month. And also, if anyone missed any part of the didactic on exposure ladders, we will have the video of the didactic posted up on our webpage, so you can go back and watch those or share with your colleagues. We do stop the video recording at this point in the case-based learning so that everyone can feel